This is the essence. We're in a 24-hour period from 4 o'clock this afternoon in France through to the final race at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So there is the start of the race. In fact, some of the drivers not having to really sprint, but just get into the spirit of getting across, sitting in, strapping down. We saw Carlos Monteverde jogging to the D-Type Jaguar at the front of the grid. There he is, just swinging out into action. And again, even though it's a ceremonial start, we had several near collisions, Jim.
A throwback to the days when the tires were skinny and the drivers were plump.
Some of the drivers have really taken that quite literally this time. They've stayed back in period. Oh dear, the number 44 not getting underway. And also the Dina, the Panhard Dina in the background. It was the Talbot T26 that wasn't underway, but gradually, even with a few push starts down towards the tail end of the grid, one of the AC Bristols sitting static, waiting for a shove. The number 17 Jaguar D-Type with John Young clearly is going to be formed up at the very back of everything, one would think, because he's has to wait until the last of these cars, and the little Panhard does not want to get going.
356 in there.
Oh, yeah. Now, the 356 there, that's shared by Sam Tordoff, British touring car front runner over the years, who dabbled with GTs. He's gone back, and he's really starting to enjoy that 356. And he should be sharing that with Richard Woolmer. Martin Stretton, green helmet, look out for him. He's always very quick. He's not in the quickest car there. So, round the corner for the first time where they're not at, or last time they're not at full racing speed. The pole is on the outside of the circuit. It's Carlos Monteverde's car. He's sharing that with, I think, John Pearson. And we have blast off. It was very much 2 by 2 by 2. So well done, ladies and gentlemen, out there on the field. And now the racing starts, and it's Monteverde's car that's got its nose in front. But there's definitely a challenge from the inside, and the leader's changed. I think that's Steve Boltby-Brooks up into the lead of the race in his D-Type. That's the one with the taller fin on the back. The other one, Monteverde's car, has the lower fin, you see, without the sort of triangular tail section to it. Tucked in behind, Clive Joy has moved up in number 3. And all very, very neat and tidy through the Dunlop course. What a fantastic view. The wonderful sweeps as they come down to the Forest S's. And after that very, very positive start, the driver from second place, Steve Boltby-Brooks, is now pulling away. Clive Joy has moved up from 5th to 2nd. And our poleman, Monteverde Pearson car, back into 3rd. The number 4 is in 4th place. That's the best of the Lotuses. And making its own noise and making the biggest hole in the airstream is the mighty Cadillac.
The number 17 D-Type Jaguar has come around but gone back into the pits. So one of the pre-race favorites started late and had to start from the pit lane and has now come back to the pits. There goes the Le Monster as the field has come by. He'll get his chance to make it around, try and catch his sister car, the big, as Bruce said, big hole in the air. Well, I was able to put up on historicracingnews.com some video of this beautiful Maserati. They were checking the engine timing, and the sound of that car is just absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Oh, but a big mistake there. Massive twitch from the Maserati. He's managed to hold it, but he's gone off the circuit, gunning it to get back on. But that was not the sort of thing that that Josef Rettenmeier would have wanted for that. Now, I'm interested, who is driving the number 3 D-Type that's up into 2nd place from 5th on the grid, the pale green car. We have many drivers listed for it. Patrick Simon, great, actually must be a tall driver. It could be Patrick Simon because his head's very high above the windscreen. Norman Nato, contemporary F2 racer turning GT racer these days, and he's closed right in. I think could be Patrick. Patrick, fellow commentator, but Lucky Man has a BMW 1 to play with. But whoever's on board, Jim, is being very, very bold with the steering and kicking the tail out in that number 3 D-Type, closing in on the race leader. Certainly full marks for exuberance out there. But 2 other drivers also, Isabelle Legac and Clive Joy, the car owner, listed. We'll have to try and guess who it is. Our timing screens aren't telling us. They say Joy, Trenery and Simon. So, in fact, Trenery isn't even listed on this one for me. So, timing, the grid sheets have changed throughout the course of this meeting. It's not a case of, oh, I fancy driving your car. They would have had some form of plan. Yeah. But it's 3 Jaguars, then a gap, then the Maserati, we will say, because there we have the 450S and the 250S. Which do I prefer shape-wise? I think the former, but they're so sleek.
Yes,
the chasing one is a little more
better as well.
Yeah, it's a bit meatier.
One of the things I like about the old sheds is we see them throw the cars around a lot more than the modern day race cars. We've had more tail hanging than we've seen in the last 24 hours of Le Mans put together. It's a different kind of racing, different kind of car. That was one of the Lotuses that had beached itself.
Yes, obviously we couldn't see a number, but all eyes on this battle. It's Steve Boltby-Brooks, runs the aviation section down at Goodwood Motor Circuit. and has been racing. Yes, what a dreadful, dreadful job. But he's been racing for a number of years, going better and better and better. But he's going to have to be on his toes, because between Indianapolis and Arnage, here comes the challenge. Is that Patrick Simon?
I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure. Whoa, what a... Wow, talk about carrying more speed through the corner.
Yeah, that really was
standing.
No fear of the throttle. Very happy to apply. We saw it coming out of one of the chicanes. He was quite content to put the power in early and slip and slide away around. But
he's not going to hold the position, though.
No, well, no, but he certainly
outpowered.
He was outpowered, but he carried more momentum around the outside. And look, he doesn't mind under braking. He is very happy to have that car twitching around him. And if it is Patrick Simon, he used to race in the Porsche Super Cup and other things. He's used to power. But how much historic racing he's done in these truly historic cars in the 1950s is another thing altogether. So replay this great moment, and just look. There was actually quite a lot of caution from Steve Boltby-Brooks. I think he decided, slightly sideways, wait, now I've now got it straight, now I'll put the power on. Power aplenty as he goes up to the Porsche curves. So it's these two Jaguar D-Types pulling away. Talking of pulling away, here is pulling away from the sister D-Type that started pole position. So it looks like that's car number 6 with that tally. It's Stefan Rettenmeier. No, that's a Maserati Barchetta. Oh, it is Stefan. Oh, it is
not a Lotus.
What? No, it is
67. Yes, it
67.
is a
I was going to say it is a Lotus. That's certainly a Lotus.
The car that actually raced here in 1956. It's a Lotus 1500.
Yes. So, at the end of the first racing lap, it's as close as you can see on the screen. What's that, a second perhaps? Let's see as they cross the start-finish line. 0.85 of a second between Steve Brooks in the lead car and we think Patrick Simon, just adjusting his rear-view mirrors there. And if he looks in the rear-view mirrors, he'll see that the Monteverde Pearson D-Type is getting smaller behind him. And the two Maseratis, Rettenmeier and the Wilson Stretton car, very close indeed, but they are falling away. So it's 3 Jaguars, 2 Maseratis, and we're looking back to the best of the rest, and it is indeed car number 4 that's best of the rest, which is Christian Traber-Serge Kriknoff, who's driving the best of the Lotus 11s and the 67 car. Danish flags on board, and so it should, because one of the drivers is a member of the Danish royal family.
Yes, the Crown Prince of Denmark, taking time off from his family to come and enjoy. He's quite the sportsman.
Absolutely so, yes. Many. We've got quite a few pit visitors as well, indeed, including Martin Stretton, who's got to jump from one car to another. But this is before your regular pit stop window, it must be said. So let's take a look at the wildest moment of the race so far. I think that's the Jaguar Jupiter. Yes, it is. And that's taking, I'll take the high road, you take the low road, I'll take any road, but I've managed to hold it together at the Porsche curves. I've had a big tank slapper and I've got away with it. The wall was moved back this year, and that was a big helping hand for him there.
That tungsten paint will wreak havoc on his tires.
Yes, don't want to do that too many times. Good to see and to hear, of course, the mighty Cunningham, but being driven with the degree of caution you require down the S's until your tyres are up to temperature, your driver's up to temperature, and just ahead of an Allard. Similar amount of noise, British bodywork with a massive Cadillac engine under the hood, so the J2's always exciting. Pit visits, unfortunately, a feature of racing on hot days. We saw Martin Stretton come in, and there he is in the Fraser-Nash, communicating effectively with the crew. But I'm sure he'll be back out, and we'll see him in the remainder of this race for post-war cars, 1949 to 56 at Le Mans. If you're just joining us, we're in the first race of the Grid 2, the Batch 2 of cars. These are the cars that raced at Le Mans between 1949 and 1956. And this is the lead battle. Very, very sideways chase car. We think with Patrick Simon at the wheel being very, very dramatic. Rather more contained in front, but still leading the race. Plenty of straight line speed in this D-Type battle. Steve Brooks leading the way. The set third of the D-Types now has company. The Maserati is closing in. So Carlos Monteverde's car in third place, number 21. That's the cream-coloured car on the left-hand side of the screen. As they go down the Mulsanne straight, he's got the better of the two Maserati challengers. The 450S getting closer and closer to him. And Stefan Rettenmeier, I think, really fancies his chance, the yellow band on his nose. But let's take a look through this. Oh, well, we were going to look at the second chicane, but let's go back. The Monster was late out of the pits. It went out. It's done its racing lap, but would rather do more. What's he want? He wants a passenger. Yep. He wants a passenger, Jim.
There's something on the right-hand side of the car that he's not happy.
Of course, the right-hand side of the car is about 6 feet from the driver, These are big, big beasties. So here is our battle between the D-types, and it seems around the lap, the Monteverde Pearson car, number 21, has started to make a break, but here's the move for the lead.
There we go.
Shaped out well, good exit from the second chicane. Right as you get to Mulsanne, the track just kinks a little bit to one side, and they're having been super bold on the brakes, but also bravado on planting the throttle. The man who's taken the lead to put the number 3 D-Type in the lead of the race. But 21, Bolby Brooks is never beaten, because look, he's got great power out of the corner and accelerating through the kinks. So he's regained the lead, but we don't mind, Jim, because that means we have to have another passing manoeuvre from the driver who's back in second place now, who's just been no stranger to, well, he's been a stranger to the brake pedal because he hardly visits it.
Well, the 25 car obviously has more power than the 3 car. I don't know if that's a product of being a year newer or a year later in development, but it is certainly in a straight line faster than the 3 car. The 3 car seems to be, it's like Simon has put that car on his shoulders as now he tries to go around the outside, which he does between Indianapolis and Arnage. Now, can he hold on? Oh, man. This is absolutely fantastic. This is, without a doubt, the best battle of all the races we've seen so far today.
Absolutely so, because it's great when you have 2 cars that you think ostensibly are similar, but actually they do have manifold little differences. Throw in the driving style, and that was the first time that we saw Patrick Simon going to the outside of the corner. Effectively, roles were reversed, but again, it's the punch and the power that Steve Brooks has out of corners, and then the bravery of Patrick Simon, who goes back and back and back when you get to the braking area. And look, he's trying to, well, most people try and drive in a straight line. He's just having so much fun. He's throwing it around from side to side. Sadly, some not able to join them out on the circuit. We've had a fair few pit visitors. That's the MGA sitting in there. Quick repairs. So let's have a look. Number 67, we had a spin from this one early on. The Danish entered Lotus 11, and that had to be pulled out of the gravel. Here's the gravel, here's the car.
And around again.
So that's the second spin for that one. That isn't the one from which it had to be towed. But again, you're then facing the traffic as they swing through the first corner, and you see the whites of their eyes if you're unlucky. Ooh,
that's not good.
Might need a helping hand, but it's quite a long way across on the gravel for Marshals to get there to try and push that car clear. He just can't engage a forward gear at the moment, and he's now sliding down the slope. Oh no, here come out of the final corner our lead battle. It's become a 3-way battle, because it seems that maybe the brakes are starting to go away on number 3. I'm having a bit of a guess there. He's fallen back. The Monteverde Pearson car is getting closer and closer. At the top of the hill, they're going to find that Danish Lotus 11. Hopefully out of the area just by the gravel, but it may be in the past. Right, driver of number 3, we think Patrick Simon signalling something to his pit crew. Maybe he's saying, I promise I won't use the brakes quite like that. But good to see the Lotus has got away, because I didn't want them to come hooning around the corner and find him sitting there, sliding slightly back towards them, bodywork aflame and all of that. So, Jaguar D-Types all the way, and a lap and a half ago we had the better of the 2 Maseratis in 4th place closing in, and that has really fallen back, which is number 5, Joseph Rettenmeyer, his 450S. I am delighted to say I'm joined in the commentary box by Paul Tarsi. He's taken over for a short while for Jim Roller, who's now lying down on the floor. It just got too exciting for Jim, I'm afraid. 3-way battle for the lead. You've timed your arrival very well, Mr. Tarsi. Well, exactly so, and I think it's a very good point you made there, Paul, that though people, when they look back starry-eyed and think D-Types, they automatically think Le Mans and world sports car races, but the fact that, of course, from the factory point of view, it's very good business to sell cars for club racing. But this is far from club-level racing when you look at the standards. Steve Brooks on the left of screen, slightly flaming out under braking, but super bold all race on the brakes so far. Patrick Simon taking the lead in Clive Joy's pale blue C-Type. That's a D-Type. That's the second of the chicanes, but again, he's so positive, getting the power down early, sliding, but the 21, sorry, not the 21, the other D-Type that's now back in second place, car number 25, seems to have lots of grunt. So let's take a look at the replay. Beautiful body lines, the AC Express Bristol of Koenig. How's that for balance? Lovely bit of super slow-mo. Yeah, I think you could be right. That's Laurent Deplace and Jean-Luc Bois. Quite a few French entered DB2s. Can't quite see the puncture though, but unfortunately, second pit visit. Now this is the driver change. Martin Stretton is driving 2 cars, so very early stop out of the Targa Florio Fraser Nash. Look, he's got 3 teammates to hand over. They're all doing 2 laps each or something. But with these each plateau, each group of cars, they have 3 races. This is the first of theirs. Second one will be in the hours of darkness, and the third one, providing the cars are still running, tomorrow, any time up until 4 o'clock, at which point the results are aggregated. So some of these drivers won't be taking part in this race, they'll be doing the next race. Not any old penalty, it's got a 4-minute penalty. That must be massively comprehensive, and particularly the fact the car is only down in 32nd position, and number 19 is a Triumph TR2. The pit window is now open. That's why we saw Martin Stretton coming in as early as he could. And he came in last time around as well, so something possibly problematic with the car. So Paul Tarsi and me, Bruce Jones, in the commentary box, looking at some of the first pit visitors, some of them having a little cushion tucked around their backs to make sure they're comfortable. Lancia Aurelia coming in, the first Lancia to compete at Mans. Now, early in the race, Paul, we had the Maseratis very close to each other, and then the number 5, Joseph Rettenmeier, started to drop the 250S, but it's got right back on his tail, and they were almost keeping the D-Types honest, but they've fallen back into a race of their own.
This is a very different circuit from the way that those cars would have raced back in period, and I think that really is reflective with the 250S being able to keep up with the 450. 450's got lots of power, lots of grunt, whereas the 250 is a different kind of car. But we've got the chicanes, we've got the various different aspects from there. If you think about it, that when these cars were racing, if you like to start the lap at Tête Rouge, that was a flat-out blast down to Mulsanne Corner, then through the twiddly bits at Indianapolis and Arnage. But then having done that, what you then had was running all the way down, flat out through White House and back, and then, of course, none of the stuff the other side of the start-finish line. So it was right the way down to the S's. So these cars would have been very quick. So a Maserati 450S would have absolutely run away from a 250 simply because it had the power. With this much more complex circuit now, it's having its problems.
Well, talking of that 450S, that was the first of the front runners to make its pit stop. Joseph Rettenmeier has come in to hand over to himself because he's one of the drivers running solo. Just hold that picture if you will. Good to see that DB2 Aston Martin is still going around. So out of 4th position, he's now fallen to 7th. It will be more than that, as a lot of cars have come past while he was at a pit stop. Nigel Webb just coming in for his pit stop. But out on the track, whatever the problem was for this DB2 Aston Martin, it seems to be behind it. That is running at what I would say is roughly its competitive racing speed.
I think it may have just had a problem coming out of Tête Rouge, and that the bucking that we saw was maybe over the razor curbs on the inside of Tête Rouge, but certainly looking absolutely fine there. Nigel Webb, as you say, coming down pit lane in that pale green C-Type Jaguar. That is an ex-Duncan Hamilton and Sterling Moss car. That car won the RAS 12 hours in period. So it's certainly a car of some repute. Oh, look at that racing there. Side by side coming out. I don't think the C-Type actually saw the Cooper very much.
No, well, the Cooper's even lower. Great to see the 100 Austin Healey 100Ms, a whole host of those, and some 3000 S's would then be in the later category. But very, very popular car. For many people, it was more of a rally car than a racing car, but just a good, solid car that didn't cost a fortune. And these, of course, back in the late 1950s, to come racing at Le Mans, it was almost attainable for your average man.
Yeah, it was.
Well, you're very average man. You're slightly better than average man.
Yes, it wasn't the chap. It was a welder or a milkman, but it was certainly something where you could come and bring a car without spending a huge amount of money. And this Healey 100 very much falls into that category. So we've got the Cooper is still in the pits, or is now in the pits. That unusual bobtail Cooper, of course, single seat, but just about eligible in terms of being a sports car back in the period.
Yeah, you look at them. John Clark will stay on board, and he will really make that go. He's been racing historics for a very long time. Great aplomb, but as you said, central seat as close as that little dorsal fin. And very effective. And as we saw when another one was out on the circuit, able to put it where it wants to go. Very, very nimble. And I'm sure he's going to feature in the second half of the race. Effectively halfway through the first race for batch 2 of the cars here at the Le Mans Classic. You're enjoying it on the LeMansClassic.com streaming service all around the world. This is the event for the cars that race at Le Mans between 1949 and 1956, when racing really started to stretch its legs again. People started the first race here after the Second World War. 1949, a lot of the cars, Paul Tarsi, were from before the First World War. People hadn't got around to making new ones, but very quickly things changed as the manufacturers poured in to the Le Mans 24 Hours.
That's what we had, because clearly 1949 there were no cars, and it was only the cars that had been pre-war. But the evolution of the cars over that relatively short period of time, yeah, was like going up a cliff rather than off a cliff. And that you can look at that and just look at some of these cars in this event. We have the Jowett Jupiter is there, stopped on pit in.
This is the car that had he's had a problem coming in, but he already had a massive run across the gravel down at the Porsche curve several laps ago. Maybe this is a result of the general shaking and bouncing and jostling it had. But, oh, how annoying. You decided you're going to limp back to the pits and you failed to make it go. Not all the cars race without roofs, and the number 1 Aston Martin DB2, we saw it limping back, and driver change time, a beautiful period cockpit, of course.
Yes, there aren't many cars these days that have a walnut dash, are there?
No.
It's something which is absolutely lovely. That Jowett Jupiter that we saw, of course, developed very much from a road car, a saloon car called the Jowett Javelin, a little horizontally opposed front-wheel drive system in there. That is a genuine race car. Did actually run here, and so has every right to be here. And oh, look, there's the Cadillac. I love Le Monstre. It's a recreation of the 1950 car, and that was something in its own right, because that was really pushing the boundaries of what was allowed.
Just not entirely sure. The car that's cream D-Type, to my eye, went past the DB Panhard in the pit lane, unless it could say it was already moving over towards its pit position. So I think that's Carlos Monteverde getting out, and one of the Pearsons, again, we just have the name Pearson on the screen, getting in. But this is right in the mix. It's coming from 3rd position. It really is a case of a race for the D-Type Jaguars, being led by the number 3 car. We think Patrick Simon at the wheel, but he's come into the pits. There it is on the left-hand side of our screen.
For a dreadful moment, I thought that was gravel rather than cement or concrete behind that pale blue D-Type. But a quick bit of water fueling the driver, and these D-Types are going to have battle rejoined very, very short.
But the difference is Patrick Simon is staying on board the number 3 car, so he knows the state of the tyres, he knows the state of the circuit, he knows the state of the brakes. And the driver change for the 21 car, the driver going out is going to have that little voyage of discovery around the first half of the lap or so. So Patrick Simon, at least we can now confirm that's him. We saw the close-up of his helmet. He's the one in number 3 that's leaving pit exit. And also at the same time, I expect, who's going to get out first? 20 or second? Is it 21 or 25? Let's have a look. There's number 3. Now we have to look behind that massive Michelin stanchion and see which of the D-Types is going to be next in line. I think it's going to be the 25 car that was started by Steve Boltby-Brooks.
It's all to play for at this point, with these wonderful, iconic D-Types that everybody always thinks of D-Types as being Le Mans, as you quite rightly said, Bruce. I think, a nice bit of tail slide coming out of the right-hand part of the Dunlop chicane. But these cars, yeah, built absolutely to win here. They were very successful. The factory built these short-nose cars, no fin on the back. They were slightly in period and downgraded from what the works cars were. Ironically, of course, they were nowhere near as quick on the twisty British circuits as they ever were in anything to do with Le Mans or Reims or anywhere else.
What we just saw on screen was the car that's actually leading the race by dint of not having made a pit stop. It's the Sandy Watson Kirkaldy 24 Lotus 11. Here it is coming up over the rise. So he's going for at least one further lap while the pit window remains open. But of course, he then owes us a pit stop. So he will go back down the order, but it's a very strong pairing. Andrew Kirkaldy, I think, is the driver at the wheel. Looks like a Saltire on the helmet, or equivalent to the David Coulthard helmet in a way, but a busy pit lane. There is a minimum pit stop time and a very handy little countdown device. Off you go. One of the two 300 SL Mercedes. Very tiny pit stop there, but we've seen drivers before setting off just a little too soon. Is this the sister car? I think it is. Oh, it's a series of moments. Now, this is what happens when you have... that was the driver that ostensibly in second place. It's whoever's taken over the 25 car next. It should be probably Andrew Smith getting up... Yes, it looks like Andrew's helmet. Taking just far too much speed into the first chicane. Massive. He's worked those biceps and forearms, got it in a straight line, and Andrew Smith, I'm sure he'll fight his way back again, but that would come with the I'm buying the round of drinks for everybody tonight because I've been a massive fool. It's on your out there.
Yes, and did I tell you about the time that I nearly lost it on the first chicane at the Mulsanne Straight? Yes, that was a good save, we have to say, and those two are going to be rejoining that battle very shortly. They're cutting through the traffic, and they're going to have to work that through. We see the number 53 car there. Oh, that's a shame. That's the Lotus 11, which has stopped. Hard to tell quite where right now, but...
Well, I think he's been very clever. Wherever, for Belgian racer Eric Steiss, that happened, he was aware where the brakes and the wall were, so he pulled that next one. It's been pulled back because you don't want your car to be caught out once it's broken down by the side of the circuit. But the Pearson-driven 21 D-Type now starting to see, is it getting closer? I have to look quite a way up the distance to try and find the number 3 car. Out of shot now, so that means Patrick Simon, not just a good pit stop, but it was a fact, because he was in the car. There is our race leader. He knew what it was doing in the first half of the race. He isn't having to explore the track and the car. There is the gap back to the creamy white D-Type in second place with the Pearson on board, and then Andrew Smith coming in behind. He's going to atone, I'm sure, for that moment of over-exuberance and certainly oversteer into the first chicane. Very well held indeed. Little Oscar, sadly, puttering towards one of those exits at circuit side. Can't see if he's actually dropping anything, but hopefully they'll pull that away. Oh, sorry, it's a Keith Climax. I walked around the paddock. I was used to the sister car, which is sort of a sort of green grey metallic. There was a little red Oscar, but great variety of cars bought. What's your favourite?
Oh, don't. You can't ask me that. There's so many wonderful things.
So, pit stops continue, breaks for some of the drivers, and just to stress, again, it's a very hot afternoon, not really very nice having a helmet on board. Lots of ventilation for the drivers here, but staying cool in a hot environment, very much a key to success in this race. Engine fired up, driver change effected for the number 74 Maserati crew. Almost all the top teams have made their pit stops, and that's Martin Sucari from Argentina and Elliot Sucari. So people from far and wide. The car, Andrew Kirkaldy bringing it in. Or is that Sandy Watson? They're both Scots, so they both could have the Scottish flag on the Saltire on top of their helmets, and both doing quite a lot of racing together now. But as you can see, the driver popping the belts a little bit, or loosening the belts, not popping them. But here is our race leader. They don't want to lose time on the way in the pits, but they do have a minimum time there at a standstill, so there's no need for a great big rush. But drivers are drivers.
Yeah, the red mist happens, and that's okay, really all it takes.
There's the answer. There is Sandy Watson, trying not to snap the door off by standing back on it, and he now climbs into the Lotus 11. So the taller figure of Andrew Kirkaldy hopped out, and you can see snug as a bug in a rug. In goes Sandy Watson into the confines of the cockpit.
These three leading D-types are actually a slightly different specification in that the one that we've been talking about, the cream-coloured car, actually has the later style windscreen because they changed the regulations that cars had to have some luggage space and to have a big windscreen. So these have what was always known as the Formula One windscreen, which you can see there on the number 3 car, a wraparound screen. The cream car that we've seen has got the latter regulation windscreen, which is much wider and goes right the way across the car. That might have a bearing on top speed because that's a big lump of perspex to be slowing that car down. So when we get that car back in shot, we'll have a look for that.
Well, also the bigger screen will give a lot more driver comfort. When you race with a vestigial, a minimal screen, you do get quite a battering. It doesn't really matter in a race when you're only in the car for half an hour or an hour, but through the small hours of the morning, if your head and neck are being bounced around. Some great driving out on the circuit. We saw the Sucari Maserati back on the circuit. Immediately he saw the race leader coming up and flagged him, pointed him, go that way, go that way. And that's what the driver coming up on traffic just wants to see. He wants to know that you've noticed him. If you then give him a directional cue, that's even more comfort as they're going past. Clearly, a lot of closing speed differences, and being overtaken on both sides at once will be a bit of a moment for the driver of the DB back there. But for these drivers front to back in this field, as we said, 60-something cars at the start of the race came out to play. There's going to be traffic in bunches at various points around the circuit, and that's what Patrick Simon is having to work his way through. You can see the nose of his pale blue D-Type. He's just got the AC Ace to go past, and he's got through a gaggle of 6 cars.
And look at that pale blue D-Type, how high it is sitting on its suspension, that long before we really understood what downforce was all about, as cars got to the top end of their speed, you actually saw them rise up on their suspension. And that's exactly what we have seen there. That this was all about cutting through the air as quickly as it possibly could.
Nonsense. It's all about having the car driven sideways. That's why we love Patrick Simon. That's why the TV director just wants to put his camera on him. And why wouldn't you? That is the essence of historic racing. And of course, it's tempered by the fact it's a driver who came up through modern racing. So he's used to cars that last. So he's attacking it in a way. He's driven enough cars over the decades to now have mechanical sympathy. But in the early days of his racing, you raced it until it broke.
And isn't it great, though, that we've got so many dads and lads racing this weekend, fathers and sons who have teamed up in the same cars. And that is that balance of, yes, well, I've been racing for 20, 30 years. You can come along and race with me. And then when you talk to those people, 5 years later, it's actually the other way around, that the son is now teaching the father how to drive quickly.
Well, it's the least you can do. The father paid for the son's racing. I don't know, maybe I'm just making a point there. The car 66, another one being pushed back through the barriers, the really unusual DKW Monza, and this is what I love. Different manufacturers, some you've heard about the cars, you've seen them in result sheets when you study historic racing, but then you see them in the flesh, and with that DKW I went up, it's just so small and nimble and lovely.
I think that's one of the things, is that clearly with the onset of aerodynamics in probably the 70s, cars got bigger, and that these cars don't have a huge footprint. That the D-Type is a pretty small car. And you know, people always talk about Austin Healey's as being the big Healey. It's always the thing that people talk about. And they're not very big at all. They're no bigger than an MGB. But we see the D-Type now coming on through, that the pit window is now closed. So if you haven't done it now, you're not going to do it. But I think everybody has done it. Yes, everybody's stopped. So the pale blue D-Type on its way. It's all run for the line now. Oh, and a bit of a battle there. Oh, that was very close between the 18 and the 67.
Well, that's Nigel Webb in the C-Type. He's running in 8th position. 67 is a lap down, but that was a slight lack of vision, I'd say, on both halves, and hopefully they've learned from that. It didn't seem as though there was any particular damage. Here comes Eva Perron's décolletage on the bonnet of the Carrera Panamericana livery 356A. We saw that out earlier, but just looks fantastic.
Doesn't it? And of course it was so strange at the time to see cars that were carrying any sort of sponsorship, because in Europe particularly, cars just had the number on the side, and that was all there was. And to have seen a car like that would have been completely different. The Monster still goes on its imperious way. This Cadillac-based car, which it looks ridiculous, but it's wonderful.
So it does. I mean, it looks like it's the sort of car you'd send out to dry a circuit or blow ice off it. It looks, you know, imagine it going around an ice rink or something to make it sweet for the curling competition that was coming. But it's the variety that really is the spice of life here at this vintage. Cars became slightly more homogenous later, but the whole point about this meeting, cars from 1923 to 1981, it's variety, and it's the cars that we all look back with great love. This race continues right on, but right now it's number 3 leading the way, Patrick Simon. Into the final 10 minutes of the first race for Batch 2 cars, the cars from the race at Le Mans between 1949 and 1956. And looking at the livery on that Porsche 356, also competed around the world out in the Carrera Panamericana out in Mexico.
Yeah, the number 2 car looking a bit smoky, and you don't want that with a V8 Fiat, but certainly pulling out to the side. Eva Perron continues on her imperious way. That car, I don't know, that's also looking a bit slow, Bruce.
Well, I tell you, a car that's looking very fast is the one that just went past. It was the Maserati, number 16, because Martin Stretton started the race in the Fraser-Nash Targa Florio, one of the first to make a pit change, driver change. He then hopped out, waited for the Maserati to come in, and is now really started to give chase. He's got to gain a minute out of the last 10 minutes of this race. But he will press on. There's Nigel Webb having another little moment. This little Lotus 11 fighting away next to him. They've stayed together, but 18 is nowhere near him. They're a lap apart.
That's a bit of a knife fight, isn't it, with those two? There's nobody giving or asking for any space at all.
But this is the little Lotus 11 that we saw spinning up into the gravel and then having another spin elsewhere. So it had a driver change, and it's now going increasingly well. It's all the way down in beyond 47th position. It is. Around the outside, and it really is a big outside around the monster. Much better to go past the DB Panhard in the background. There is our race leader, 7 3/4 minutes remaining, and largely the little back gaggles of car in front of him. What Patrick Simon wants to see is there 1 by 1. He doesn't want them 2 by 2 or 3 by 3, but such is his bravado in the car and the performance of that Jaguar D-Type that number 3 car is going to carry on, just picking them off. His advantage over the chasing Monteverde Pearson D-Type, number 21, is just under 10 seconds, 9.1 seconds at the moment, and I think at the moment looks like it's going out a little bit.
And with a little over 7 minutes of this race left to run, that's a big ask for the car in second place. A little sign there.
No, that was a thank you. That was a thumbs up. Thank you. You kept out of my way, and I'm able to continue. In fact, having said that, Patrick Simon was pulling clear the first part of the lap. The lap split into 3 sectors, as all international race circuits are for timing purposes. The second place Monteverde Pearson car gained ground, but possibly due to traffic, it then lost 2 seconds in the middle sector of the lap. And here's the Jarrett Jupiter. Chance to look on board. They'd rather show the car when it was out racing around the circuit, but we saw it have a big off-track moment at the Porsche curves. And it limped back and came to a standstill before it got into pit entry, before being dragged in. But no such problems for another pale blue car. This pale blue car, the number 3 Jaguar D-Type, going around the it's a Borg Ward. Or is it a DKW? I'll just refresh myself on cars of an earlier period than I am.
Yeah, and just interesting to see the D-Type just looking up a tiny bit, and there we see the 8V Fiat pulling over to the left-hand side of the track. That car is in trouble, and we would expect that to be a pit visitor very shortly, going nowhere near as fast as we would expect it to be. But the D-Type absolutely imperious at the front. As I said, locking a wheel on the way into Indianapolis. He's not hanging about. He's not deciding to do anything like that. There's a 75 Mercedes, which is very difficultly placed because the back wheels are in the gravel, and that's not the way you want to do it.
And here's how it happened. And again and again, we see cars going off at Arnage, and that photographer got a face full of dust and possibly gravel, but luckily for him, the car will be out of the way soon. But bogged down at the back. It's only a small spin. You can see the signature mark of the tyres on the outside of the circuit off the racing line. Oh, he's even raised the door to say thank you. That's what we like in historic racing. Great manners, good seats. So one of these 2 fantastic 300 SLs, you go up and they look as though they've been wiped with wax, but not wax to make them shiny, wax to make them grubby, which I like.
I'm not a fan of the waxed look of the DB that is again over on the far left-hand side of the road. that tiny little engine in that car is pushing for all it's worth to get round this circuit as quickly as it possibly can. Puff of flame out of the side of the 75. That probably is going to be just as a result of that spin and everything settling down properly within that. When a hairy moment there for our leader, who didn't get the chance to get to the TR2 before they got to the left-hander at the Dunlop chicane. The driver of the Triumph then making up for that by keeping well over to the right as they went under the bridge.
Yeah, but what it's showing is that Patrick Simon is not backing off at all. He's sort of taking the Ayrton Senna approach of overtaking. It's not a question of shall I, shan't I? No, I am. And he's going through. He doesn't necessarily need to do it. His advantage, well, in fact, he came down because of some of the moments. It's down to 7.8 seconds, so it has been closing in, but it is ebbing and flowing. And certainly the Pearson Monteverde car, we want to see in the background of the shot any second now. No, not quite long enough to catch it coming out of Trenery, just there as we lost the shot. But let's have another look of Patrick Simon attacking and well, sliding the car wherever he wants to put it. But sometimes where he wants to put it has another car. He's trying to lap them and he's not backing off. But just the level of adjustment, such precision, and just sitting on top of that car.
But isn't this absolutely typical of any Le Mans race, that it's about working your way through the traffic, that we've all watching enough Le Mans races to know that in any period, drivers are all about working their way through the traffic, hacking the tail out there, which was tremendous. And that's the 59 Aston Martin, Grandidier's Aston Martin there, which is stopped. I think that's under the Dunlop Bridge.
Yes, it looks to be facing the wrong way under the Dunlop Bridge. This is the final lap, and oh dear, it's all spin round time. Number 9, one of the Healey's going for a rotation as well. That's Philippe Bresson and Philippe Montagnier. And this is how it happened.
And I think he just was offline because he was thinking about which way to go round the car he was overtaking. Nasty moment there for Nigel Webb in the C-Type, who had the broadside view of that car. But final lap, and the D-Type continues on its way.
Down to 7.8 seconds at the start of the lap. The chasing Monteverde Pearson, number 21, D-Type, not yet in shot. The Allard going very slowly on the left of our screen. The car in the background of the shot is the DB Panhard. Tiny little 850cc engine. Far more power, of course, for the Jaguar D-Type that's leading the way. But the chase, the fastest car on the track is, in fact, the car in 4th place, the Maserati, with Martin Stretton doing his best to try and catch up, but he's a minute and a bit in arrears. In fact, he's just had a poor end to his lap. No such problems to the end of the race for the driver that started, and is clearly going to be one of the 3 drivers, with Simon Trenery and Clive Joy, who will get to compete in the 3 races for Batch 2 cars. This is Batch 2, the 1949 to 1956 Chargers from Le Mans. All shapes and sizes welcome, and all shapes and sizes arrived here to race. But really, the car from the late 50s, the shape of the late 50s, was the Jaguar D-Type, and Patrick Simon can be very proud indeed. He worked his way from 5th on the grid, quickly up to 3rd, got past those 2 Maseratis, then hunted down the number 21 D-Type, and likewise Steve Brooks's car, number 25, put it into the lead, but really had to fight for it. Second half of the race, he's been more on top of it in terms of the other drivers came and had to feel their way into these cars, whereas he'd driven the first half of the race, knew exactly what to expect after his mandatory minimum pit stop time. And now as he goes through Arnage for the final time, he's looking set for victory in Plateau 2, or as we call Batch 2. The gap is coming down though, Paul. It's worth 7.9 seconds. It's 7 seconds flat.
It's all a bit late though, unfortunately, Bruce. And once these drivers have gone through Arnage, as our leader just has, this is the run for home. Now that there's not too much. They're facing in the right direction. They can see the Module Sportive as he turns right into the Porsche curves. But he'll see where he's heading for. He'll know that this is the final lap and that he's on his way. But let's just look at this car through Indianapolis, tucking the back out of the car, the nose in, absolutely in control of that car.
Do you know why he does that?
Go on.
Because he can. I will go and give him a £5, which I'll take from your wallet in a few minutes. But
okay. What, another one?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Oh no!
Oh, see the Sam Tordoff green-nosed Porsche has been having a great little race, fighting really hard with the AC Ace in front of it, but in behind is the number 3 car. It's going to lap them. It's going to be a bit galling. They're going to lose one of their racing laps because they can't continue if he overtakes them before the start-finish line, and he's certainly going to put between the first chicane and the second chicane. The MGA has to let him through. And just another lock-up there from Patrick Simon. Around the final corner for the last time. Why not have a Slido? Thank you so much, Patrick. Job done. He's applauding the fans. 2 hands out of the cockpit. That's what it's about, racing. He had the fight early on, then he didn't have any opposition because he got clear, but he carried on pressing on, and it was hugely entertaining to watch. And trust me, a really lovely, lovely gentleman that loves his racing. Great fun. Fellow commentator as well, but damn, one who can drive.
Yeah, there aren't many of those. We know that.
Yes. So here we have the car coming home in 3rd place. Andrew Smith, who had that lurid moment halfway around, not even halfway around, the first chicane on his outlap, having taken over from Steve Brooks. This was a car that was at the front of the race. It's come home in 3rd place. Let's have a look. Coming into the first part of the 2-part sequence of chicanes at the end of the final lap, and Patrick Simon just thought, well, I've got to come past. Oh dear, I need to be on the other side of the track. Flick the tail out. No need to flick the tail out of the final corner, except for sheer brio and fun. 2 hands out, beautifully caught by the TV director. They're a wonderful moment. We saw in the previous race 2 drivers who finished almost side by side, touching hands just to say well done as they drove up towards the Dunlop curve. No one to hold hands with this time. 4.1 seconds was the gap at the end of the final lap. As Pearson closed in Monteverde's D-Type, in fact setting the fastest lap of the race, I think, right at the end. But for Patrick Simon, fun and victory combined, and that car will go out in 2 more races in this, the 2018 Le Mans Classic. Really great fun racing.
And Patrick Simon, I think, was judging that perfectly. Okay, so the gap between first and second came down quite a lot. He was playing to the crowd on that last lap, and certainly the last half of that last lap, that probably there's not going to be too much left in the way of tyres on that, but the number 11 C-Type Jaguar has come to a halt as well.
Well, that's unfortunate. Final lap, and he was just at the tail end of the top 10, so that would have been a good result for a Lotus 11. Good to see fans all the way around the circuit, and it's been a long, hot day, well, particularly if you're driving the Panhardiner. It hasn't just got onto the track by mistake. This was a car that raced at Le Mans. So the first race for Batch 2, Plateau 2 cars, the cars that raced at Le Mans, 1949 to 1956. Let's take a look at the highlights of the race. First race for the Batch 2 cars. It was the cars that raced at Le Mans between 1949 and 1956. We had the ceremonial Le Mans style start, the sprint across the track, and hopefully, oh yes, certainly, getting underway. The cars, though, this wasn't really the race. They went round to form up in grid formation around the back straight, but it made a fantastic sight. The sights and sounds, the colours, the shapes. Very big Cunningham in the middle of the pack there. A few cars didn't get away, including the little Panhardina in the background, the Sit Up and Beg saloon. Eventually, with a little helping hand, it got underway. Very small engine, very large body shape, but everyone nimble enough to get going out around to form the start of the race. And the start of the race was all about the Jaguar D-Types at the front. Unfortunately, just able to get out was the Monster, car that really just defies all logic. And here is the start of the race. 2 by 2 round the start line they came. Carlos Monteverde in car number 21, the cream-coloured D-Type on the front row, and Steve Brooks on 25 took the lead, and in behind, up from 5th place on the grid to 4th to 3rd goes the pale blue car with Patrick Seaman on board. That put 3 Jaguar D-Types at the front of the race, followed by a Maserati, a Lotus, another Maserati, and the best place of the 300 SL Mercedes. Out after a delay in the pits came the Monster, impressing the fans the whole way around. Looks enormous, is enormous, but actually remarkably nimble for a car that large with a wheelbase that long. And certainly in terms of novelty factor, this replica is a brilliant sight to see, Jim.
It is one of the highlights. It's one of the highlights of this race, is to be able to see those 2 Cadillacs. This was the other highlight of the race. That's the performance by Simon on this number 3 D-Type Jaguar. He had his hands full of the 25 car for a while as they battled valiantly, and it was very exciting racing. But then he just was able to assert himself after the driver changes. When he didn't change, he just grabbed this race by the throat and held on.
That was the point at which the change was made in his favour. Knowledge of the car, knowledge of the track, knowledge of the tyres, etc., etc. But still, before the pit stops, it was a game of yin and yang. The great braking of the number 3, Patrick Seaman, his D-Type, but it seemed there was a bit more punch for Steve Brooks in 25. Here we see it going into Arnage. No, sorry, Mulsanne. Arnage is still to come. And you'd see one going in 25, normally going in first and coming out second. And then, of course, with his great straight line speed. And for the Danish-entered Lotus XI, it had a couple of moments, one in the gravel, and then, unfortunately, not the only spinner at the Dunlop curve. But then, having spun, the car's facing the wrong way down the track, the scariest place to be, and it took a while to get that going. But fortunately, just got out of the corner before this trio of D-Types came into play. Patrick Seaman leading the way. Steve Brooks in behind, again, not quite as good on the brakes. But look how happy Patrick Seaman was to get the tail of the number 3 D-Type out under acceleration, just happy to mash the throttle and balance it on the exit of the corner. Then for the number 1 Aston Martin DB2, little problem, it got going all over again, so whatever was amiss, luckily was fixed. Car went back on into the race and continued all the way to the finish. And well done, sir, for staying out of the way of all the others while he had the mishap. Little Cooper T29, 39, sorry, around the outside, so nimble, and you honestly felt the driver of the Jaguar C-Type didn't even see him sitting even lower in the car. And then just after the pit stop driver change, Andrew Smith had just come out behind the 21 D-Type, got out ahead of it, and then had that moment that rattled his cage at the first chicane.
And this is the other Cadillac, the number 34, the Series 61 car. And this is the same chassis that the Le Monster is on, just with all the normal bodywork.
What if the Le Monster, I've been told, weighs 600 kilos? What do you reckon that one weighed? The full fat version.
Indeed, and talk about full fat. This is just absolutely fantastic. This is the way that Patrick Seaman spent the last half of this race, just absolutely sliding that D-Type sideways, enjoying himself in every measure.
Absolutely so, and he had a good enough lead, and there it was out of the final corner. In fact, the car coming in second place, just going through the final corner, but hands aloft, so his lead went down in 1 lap from 9 seconds to 4 seconds. But the delight that Patrick was showing was proof that he really had enjoyed the race as much as we had watching from the commentary box and the sideline. So victory to the number 3 D-Type. And let's take a look at the results. So Patrick Seaman in a 3-driver car, but the others will get their turn in the later races. Winning by 4.1 seconds from Carlos Monteverde and Gary Pearson. Andrew Smith came home third to making it a D-Type 1, 2, 3. And Martin Stretton really gave good chase, but just didn't have the legs, having taken over the number 16 Maserati. Brought it up to 4th place, could go no higher.
Second page of the results, 10 through 20.
Another good players in there, just worth picking out. Nigel Webb had a good run and with a few scary moments in his C-Type, number 18. And here we are, down on the next place, and so many different makes of cars, including a handful of little Porsches in there as well, Lotus XIs and Maseratis as well. But then you went down to the cars that finished towards the tail end of the field. In the lower ranked classes, smaller engines, streamlines, that was part of the mix of Le Mans back in period. And long may that last.